Moving to the opposition side of the House, we have Ewan Woods. Ewan is a second-year student reading HSPS at Corpus Christi. He won the right to speak through open audition. Ewan, the floor is yours.
Before I get going, I just want to say to Mr. Marrow, how many presidents have come from dynasties? Beyond that, Mr. President, at the end of last term, when the honourable member for Wolfson College was sitting in that chair, yes.
Sorry, we're having a coronation next week, and you want to talk to me about dynasties?
You brought up Euro-American, I had to hit the pot shot. When the honourable member for Wolfson College was serving as our president, I ran for election of this place, which I sadly lost. Tonight, with the privilege of being one of your first paper speakers, I shall now ensure I will never win any election again by defending the right of the minted to be minted. I know how to pick and choose my motions. It is easy, though, to characterise in this debate in such a manner as just being pro-rich for the sake of being pro-rich. Though, if I did believe that position, I would have shacked up with an Etonian 5 minutes after Freshers' Week. On a slightly more serious note, in a Britain with increasing inequality, it is hard not to see the argument that taxing the rich when they're 6 feet under the ground and can't fight back makes sense. But when we look at the way inheritance not only plays out from the perspective of the Exchequer, but its impact on regular Britons and its place in the wider tax system of the modern economy, the right to inherit wealth is not only an arguably fine thing, but its abolition is a pointless way to tackle many of the problems that the proposition has wished to tackle. So, let's look at the way inheritance tax works in Britain. The current system in the United Kingdom sees a tax on your estate worth over £325,000, raising to £500,000 if you wish to pass down your home to your close relatives, children, wife, whatever the fuck. This is at about a rate of around 40% and has generated the Treasury in the tax year of 2019 just short of £5 billion, or, in other words, 5% of an HS2. Alongside this, over 80% of this tax is generated by around just 9,400 estates, each worth around or over £1 million, whilst there is another 1,000 estates who are avoiding this inheritance tax currently. The wider picture is clear. The current rate of inheritance is reaching its general upper limit, and whilst obviously we can change the amount this tax generates by reducing the threshold or increasing the rate in which it is taxed, but fundamentally, as a redistributive measure, the inheritance tax as it currently exists is quite a poor one. Upping this tax to 100% will not only generate not much more in terms of wealth for the Chancellor, but for those inheritances below the threshold currently, or if we were to abolish the threshold outright, for the sake of argument, they will be denied a significant sum of money which they could use for God knows what else. And the impact of inheritance on regular people, not just the super rich with vast amount of stock who will be comfortable no matter what, is evident. The amount of money that someone can pass down to their children is something that vast majority of people on average incomes will probably never see. And in the case of houses, which have been brought up by, I'm pretty sure, every speaker since this motion has started, it is something that most people in this room will never see outright. I joke, but the reality of inheritance, as has been described by the proposition, is that it's turning into a tool which fastly no one can get onto the property ladder without some form of wealth from their parents. Half of parents in 2015, according to the Yorkshire Post, expected the only way for their children to get on the housing ladder was through some form of inheritance. And in tax year 2015 to 2016, 9% of first-time buyers used the inheritance from their parents as a form of deposit. God knows how much higher that is. The ONS didn't give figures, but considering the vast inflation of housing rate, I can assume it's only exponential. But even for those not looking for a home, the impact inheritance can make on someone's lives is not insignificant. It currently makes up 25% of the wealth 16 to 24-year-olds will inherit, and 10% of 25 to 34-year-olds. Not least the fact that for the vast majority of people earning under the threshold, the amount of wealth which their parents will bestow upon them is some of the largest increase in net wealth which any individual will see in their entire lives. And this is not just for those earning millions or billions, it's for those earning below the threshold of £325,000. Inheritors will know the rich will simply remain rich. Increasing inheritance tax is not the way to deal with this. But for those on average earning, or with little prospects of increasing the amount of property or wealth that they have, the change which inheritance can make and the opportunities of the right of inheritance are something which cannot be denied, even if the current tax rate on inheritance stays the same. Yes, go on. Beg your pardon, could you repeat that? Yeah. I see what you're saying, but I feel like that takes into account the advantages which the rich generally obtain beyond just purely capital. We cannot deny the social capital, the influence which schools have, the influence which vast amounts of things beyond the simple net worth of your bank account impact on the individual. And whilst the rich will have these privileges no matter what, the poor won't. And arguably, sure, Mr. Fennell.
Which millionaires are going to fund schools in their will versus the state that might actually invest in, say, infrastructure?
Again, one more time, I couldn't hear you.
Okay, so the point is, you want investment in schools and
Yeah.
utilities. The state is more likely to invest in those sorts of things than, say, privately owned millionaires who would like to give their children.
I agree, but that's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that if you go to a school with a lot of connections, you'll gain a lot of social connections, which fundamentally inheritance cannot make up for. If we want to fund schools, there are more effective ways of doing that, through things like corporation tax or even a wealth tax outright on year-on-year income. But inheritance tax is fundamentally a very inefficient method of doing this, which I'm going to get onto right now. And if we do want to tax the rich in the 21st century, Mr. President, focusing on a method invented in the 17th century is hardly the best way to do this. Forms of estate tax have existed in this country for centuries, being one of the first taxes implemented by the US federal government based on the British models of stamp duty, which have existed since King William IV and existing prior to the passing of the Bill of Rights. I think quite obviously, our economy has changed a fair bit since then. I think everyone could agree on that. But the key element on which it has shifted is the importance of the sort of dominant economic unit, going from the individual and their estate and the land which they own to the corporation and the investments which they have. And we can see that in the richest men who exist today. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates. They have a lot of money, but a lot of that money comes from the amount of stocks they own in their very rich companies, not from the outright amount of dollars in their bank account themselves. I'll wrap up. Sorry? I've got to conclude, but thank you. Whilst taking some of that wealth after their death will obviously help, fundamentally the best way to deal with this extreme inequality we see on the day-to-day is not from taxing at the grave, but taxing year on year on year at the higher levels of wealth, being the international superstructures rather than the individual in his own right. The acceptance of the basic right to inherit is generally entrenched in the way we talk about death. Will readings and fights over them are a common part of legal dramas, as are the courtrooms they're set in. And whilst the unfair nature of vast estates is as understood as the idea of inheritance as well, we cannot deny that abolishing the right to inherit wealth will not only raise not much more in terms of the amount of taxable revenue you will get from 100% inheritance tax, but is a vital source of income for regular people who do not see the vast amounts of benefit, wealth or otherwise, that the super rich gain, and is arguably the least efficient method of tackling the amount of inequality seen in Western societies. So when considering the motion, and when you walk through these doors tonight, it is worth remembering, if you want to tackle inequality, the right to inherit wealth may be a simple way to do so, but its abolition will not only be immensely unpopular with the general public, but will provide little to no benefits for the, I must conclude, will provide little to no benefit to the problems plaguing the current British economy. Thank you very much.
Once again, could I please ask that we show respect to each of our speakers tonight? That includes being respectful to each other and also includes being respectful to our officers.